Welcome back to Made to Be Whole. This week we're going to talk about the connection between human connection, and healing. Stay tuned. Made to Be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing. Hello. We're going to base our discussion today on a little book I picked up from a thrift store by Dean Ornish, who is a famous cardiologist, and his book is called Love and Survival: The Scientific Basis for the Healing Power of Intimacy. I think this is really critical no matter what you are dealing with in life, no matter what your health status. We don't heal in silos. We were meant to be part of families and part of communities. And even if your circumstances haven't delivered an ideal stage for human connection, you need to find ways to have healthy connections for people, because it's really, really critical to your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. One of the things that Dr. Ornish talks about that I have observed and I think is super, super important, even if you don't have someone yet who is that person for you, that person who you can call anytime, they're there for you, they'll pick you up in trouble, whatever you need served, and you don't have anyone to provide that, you can start by being that for someone else. And I don't mean you become a mat for someone to walk on or you allow yourself to be abused, but if you want to feel love, if you want to feel gratitude, if you want to feel good about yourself, if you want to feel, in my experience, God's love, one of the best ways to do that is by finding others that you can take care of in small and simple ways. And to not build your sense of self-worth on interactions with people who aren't real, which is posts that we may see on social media, other internet interactions, or things that give us a kind of warped sense of reality and connection. You need actual connections in real time with real people. Of course, it's great to have a lot of friends, but even having one good friend can be kind of life-changing. And there's actually a lot of scientific basis for this. But like nutrition that we've talked about before, there aren't people who are making money off connection. So it's really difficult to find spaces in the modern medical world where connection and relationships and spirituality and emotional health are acknowledged and nurtured. So Dr. Ornish in his book tells an interesting story. He talks about Dr. Mimi Garneri, and she is an interventional cardiologist who, at the time of the writing of this book, and this is a dated book, it's 1997, but she directs a reversing heart disease program based on her work at the Scripps Clinic and Hospital in La Jolla, California, spends part of her time performing angioplasties and part of her time teaching her patients how to change her lifestyle. And so this is a quote from Dr. Garneri. I recently gave a lecture to a large group of cardiologists. At first, I talked with them about radioactive stents, a wire mesh designed to keep angioplastied arteries open by exposing them to high doses of localized radiation. Although it's a new, totally unproven method with the possibility of highly toxic long-term side effects, the cardiologists just loved the ideas of these radioactive stents. They couldn't wait to try them. In the second half of our presentation, I talked about our lifestyle program. Even though we have 20 years of randomized control trial data supporting your program, that being Dr. Ornish's program, about lifestyle and cardiology and cardiac health. But cardiologists got so skeptical and even hostile to the idea that patients could change their lifestyle and that emotions play a role in health and illness that many left the room. So, unfortunately, this is not uncommon that when you bring up things like lifestyle changes, whether it be relationships, nutrition, even exercise. I mean, we do give a little lip service to exercise being important and some dietary things, but it's all very cookie cutter mainstream. There's a lot of pushback. That's soft science. That's not really helping people. I really want to help people. I really want to perform that heart-saving surgery. And even though we're super, super grateful that there are people who are able to do that, if you remember last week, we addressed the 3 levels of prevention: primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. So that extreme heart-saving surgery is a form of tertiary prevention. Somebody already has a disease, and we're trying to prevent the long-term sequelae or consequences of that. But let's get back further. Let's try to get to primary prevention, which is preventing diseases from happening in the first place. There's actually a lot of data that people fare much, much better if they have healthy relationships. People who are much, much more isolated have worse health outcomes. And it's not just because of concrete things like, well, I had someone to help me go to the bathroom after surgery, or I had someone to make food for me. It really is related also to those actual connections, the emotional piece of it. And there's a new field of study, or it was newer in the 90s. I still would say it's burgeoning and you don't hear a lot about it, is psychoneuroimmunology, which was defined by Dr. Robert Ader, A-D-E-R. And he started studying the effects of social factors on the immune system of animals, people and other animals, because there are measurable things that you can do looking at the activity of your immune system. You can look at natural killer cells. You can look at other things that show that an immune system is robust, and through that see impact. So impact of relationships and people with these relationships. That was a little bit of a muddy introduction, but thank you for bearing with me. I'm going to go through a study that was done at the University of Texas Medical School by Dr. Thomas Oxman and his colleagues. So they examined the relationship of social support and religion to mortality in men and women 6 months after undergoing elective open heart surgery. So that was either a coronary bypass surgery or a CABG, aortic valve replacement, or both. So they asked this group of individuals, number one, do you participate regularly in organized social clubs, groups? That would be a club, a church, a synagogue, civic activities like the Lions Club or Rotary, and so on. And then the second question they asked was, do you draw strength and comfort from your religious or spiritual faith, regardless of what religion or spiritual faith that would be? It could be organized religion, it could be not, it could be Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, whatever, but do you draw strength and comfort from that? They found in their research that those who lacked regular participation in organized social groups had a 4-fold increased risk of dying 6 months after surgery, even after controlling for medical factors that might have influenced their survival. So that means they adjusted for how severe was the heart disease, how old were they, had they had previous surgeries, other things that could impact it. They're able to control for that in analyzing data. And even after doing that, people who didn't have these social connections through organized clubs or activities were 4 times more likely to die within those first 6 months. Also, they found that those who did not draw strength and comfort from their religion were 3 times more likely to die 6 months after surgery. So the people who neither had regular group participation nor drew strength from their religion were more than 7 times more likely to die 6 months after surgery. So people who had both had even more protection. People who had neither were much, much more adversely disposed post-op. So Dr. Ornish says, even though I'm unaware of any factor in medicine that causes a 7-fold difference in mortality only 6 months after open heart surgery, how many surgeons even ask their patients these two questions in assessing the risk of cardiac surgery? So you think of that 7 times. If there was a medication that increased your risk of survival by 4 times or 3 times, or you took these two and you had 7 times the decreased risk of mortality, that would be a billion-dollar industry. We would be shouting it from the rooftops, but it's very politically incorrect to say, you need to be involved socially in your community. You need to gather regularly with other people, whether it's at the library or your quilting or knitting club or the Lions Club or the people you play chess with at the park every Wednesday. And you need to have spiritual faith. You need to draw on your faith. You need to pray. You need to attend church or synagogue, and you need to have those connections. That is going to help your outcomes. It's not very PC to do it, but it's very, very, very real. And one thing that I think is important, he's not prescribing a specific faith, a specific type of civic engagement, but he is showing us by citing multiple studies that those who are involved and connected with others have better health outcomes. Now, another point that Dr. Ornish makes that I think is really, really critical for anyone who's struggling with their health is there is a difference between healing and curing. Healing and curing are not the same. Disease and illness are not the same. Pain and suffering are not the same. So I'm quoting here. He says, curing is when the physical disease gets measurably better. So that would be if you had a tumor and it disappeared or it became smaller. If you had high blood pressure that through all these things you did resolved and didn't go away without medication, preferably, that would be actual curing it. But healing is the process of becoming whole. Even the words heal and whole and holy come from the same root. Returning healing to medicine is like returning justice to law. And I think that's really, really beautiful. Healing is the process of becoming whole. And something else that I think is absolutely extraordinary is Dr. Ornish posits that healing may occur even when curing is not possible. We can move closer to wholeness even when the physical illness does not improve. Of course, it is our greatest desire, wish, prayer, the object of our efforts for physical illness to go away. But I can testify that you can become whole even when those burdens are not fully taken from you in this life. I've seen that happen to people who continue to suffer despite their best efforts and the best efforts of medicine. But because they are able to make peace within themselves, because they have robust relationships, because I think for a lot of people, they're able to view themselves as an eternal soul, not just a bag of bones that's going to go back to the earth and be no more. They're able to attain that physical state even in the midst of suffering. Healing also takes time. And that's why I think having that vision of being whole, even while the process isn't complete, can be absolutely extraordinary. And there are also things, just anecdotally, there are things that we can attain in the process of healing and suffering. I've noted that for myself, times when I've been very fatigued and just couldn't be up anymore, that I had to lay down. That's when some of my best pondering and meditation has taken place. That's when some of my best conversations with my kids have happened, because I wasn't distracted by other things because fatigue or pain limited what I had to give at that point. So you can find healing not just in spite of your circumstances, but through your circumstances. So he cites other research here that asked about social support measures. Like, here's a good way to kind of measure if you have a support system. If you became ill, is there a friend who would drive you to the hospital, or would you have to take a taxi or ambulance? we would hope that we would all have someone that we could call. If you were broke, is there a friend who would loan you money? If you were sick, is there a friend who would help take care of your children until you felt better? In other words, do you have anyone who really cares about you, feels close to you, loves you, who wants to help you? And then Dr. Ornish says if the answers are no, you may have 3 to 5 times higher the risk of premature death or diseases from all causes. So looking at different studies that show that that lack of social support makes you more likely to die from a variety of things: heart disease, stroke, infectious diseases, cancer, autoimmune diseases, low birth weight for little babies, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, and so on. Our relationships are protective. The key, though, is that you benefit not just from what you get, but from what you give. You cannot control how many people care about you, but as you make the courageous effort to reach out to others and to be a caring person, those relationships will come. That's where you meet your people. If you can find places where you are comfortable and yourself and you can freely give in whatever way you have to give, you are going to become more confident, you're going to be happier, and you're going to attract the type of relationships that you long for. They're not going to come to you sitting in your house. Your Prince Charming isn't going to knock on your door when you're hiding in your basement, doing everything online. Online, like, there's so many great resources there, and that can foster connection and help us meet people we would never have met otherwise. But we have to have real live synchronous relationships with people where we're talking to them in real time, whether it's on FaceTime, conversations, eventually in person. It's just huge. Love and relationships are protective. They enhance our immune function, they enhance our resistance to disease, and more importantly, it's how we feel joy. You don't feel joy in a vacuum. And so your pattern of how you relate to other people may be impaired, especially if you had a lot of childhood trauma. I mean, it's super, super difficult if you were raised in a home where there was abuse to not either become the abuser or the abused in future relationships unless you consciously relearn how to relate to other people. And thankfully, there is a lot more trauma-informed therapy and resources out there where, if that's your desire, you can change how you relate to the world. And I would recommend with therapy, you really have to be a savvy consumer. Effective therapy requires a lot of vulnerability. So knowing that, you have to be with someone you're comfortable with. You don't have to sign up for therapy, and if you don't feel comfortable, bare your soul anyway, or just say, therapy's not for me, next, I tried it, it's not working. They are as varied as the stars in the sky because, first of all, they're all individuals with different training, different strength, different personality, different skills, different levels of integrity. I mean, there's so many different things that embody a therapist, and you need to be on the lookout for someone who's a good match for you. And I really recommend when you first start with therapy, asking a lot of questions like, what is your method? How do you help people? Will you be just wanting me to talk, or are you going to be giving me assignments? What do you see your role as, our relationship as? We go to these experts, and I don't think we should just have to blindly accept how they're going to take care of things. We need to make sure it's an approach we're comfortable with. And if we're not, you're just shopping. It's okay. You don't have to buy the first car you test drive. If you've got the money to go buy a new car, you're going to look at all the different features, what suits you best, what suits your needs. You're going to drive through. You're going to figure out, is this a good fit for me before you make a big investment? And I would posit that engaging in therapy is a much bigger investment just because of the emotional risk and vulnerability. So be very aware. Also, if you haven't had healthy relationships and you're wanting to learn how, one thing you can do is look for people who have healthy relationships in their families and their lives and watch them and become friends with those people. Ask them questions. Ask them why and how they are, how they are. Don't assume that it's easy or came naturally to everyone, or that you can tell looking at a family whether or not they actually have problems. That's just absolutely not true. So surrounding yourself with what you want to be. I saw a quote. So Cooper Flagg, who was the number one draft pick in this year's NBA draft, he left high school a year early, graduated early, did a year in the NCAA at Duke, and then was drafted number one. And he had a twin brother who stayed in high school for the full 4 years. Somebody was asking him, why did you leave early? And he said, well, my mom always said, if you're the best person in the gym, you need to find a different gym. So basically, because of his skill set and his level, it's not good to just be content being the best guy there. You've got to surround yourself with people who are going to challenge you and help you to grow and develop. And I think we should do the same thing in our relationships. Don't just pine for good relationships. Surround yourself with people who have healthy habits. When you're using technology, you've got to be super mindful. I am not at all, clearly, you're listening to this podcast, someone who eschews all technology and thinks it's bad and evil. It's got the potential to bring people together. You've got the potential that you can listen to a podcast and listen to someone who has similar interests, or find a virtual community where people who you don't live in the same state, but your kids are all suffering from the same rare disease, or you're all interested in the same obscure poet or whatever. It can bring you together and can help you stay in touch. And it's way cheaper than back in the day when you had to either write letters, or you had to have your long distance plan, and you were so excited when it was only 10 cents a minute to talk to people. I mean, there's so many cool things about technology, but Dr. Ornish quotes, her name is Sherry Turkle, and she was on the faculty of MIT's program in Science, Technology, and Society when she wrote the following: terrified of being alone, yet afraid of intimacy, we experience widespread feelings of emptiness, of disconnection, of the unreality of self. And here the computer, a companion without emotional demands, offers a compromise. You can be a loner, but never alone. You can interact, but never feel vulnerable to another person. And then he goes on to say, but our willingness to feel vulnerable, which is scary, and to open our hearts to others is essential to real intimacy. We're never, ever going to have those relationships that we long for if we can't be vulnerable. Now, how, though, does a person be vulnerable and have boundaries at the same time? I think that there is a lot to be said for our expectations. I see a couple of different extremes just in life, but also in my practice. I see some people who are so hell-bent on being independent and never asking anyone for anything that they're not even good about like accurately reporting their symptoms during a session because they don't want to complain. I'm going, it's not complaining, we're just reporting facts here. I can't help you if I don't know how you're feeling. Do you have pain? Well, it's not that bad. I didn't ask that. I asked if you have pain. What is it out of 10? How does it impact your life? You're not complaining, you're reporting symptoms. But then I've also seen people who, on the other end, want validation from every single person they see for everything they're going through. And they can't be around you if you don't like know their truth and know how much they're suffering and validate that. And that's not really reality either. Even people who are blessed with really, really healthy relationships and a lot of loving support in their life, they choose who they share what with. You've got to be discerning about what parts of your soul you bear and to whom you bear it. You've got to have those boundaries, and you'll have a spectrum of healthy relationships in your life. There may be some people who you like and you like spending time around, but you just know you can't talk to them about certain things. It's not something they're comfortable with or you're comfortable with, but it doesn't mean you can't still enjoy having lunch with them or watching a game together or whatever it is you like to do. There's some people that you can share parts of yourself with, but you can't quite share everything. And then it's a really rare treasure when you find someone that you can be your whole self with, but don't feel slighted if that's not everyone. It really is a rare gift, and the best thing you can put yourself in the position to receive that is to work on yourself, to work on integrity, confidence, loving yourself, how and who you are, and finding that inner peace so that you can have those relationships. I listened just this morning to a speech at the BYU Women's Conference from April 30th of this year by Shaima Bauman. And she told an interesting story. She talked about Disney princesses and princesses in literature, and how society, our views of what we think love and romance and everything should be, have really influenced how princesses are portrayed in entertainment. And she went to school and had absolutely no interest in love, marriage, any of those things. She didn't want to be a princess. She didn't want to have a prince. She just wanted to get straight A's. But she met someone, she fell in love, they were married, and then 13 years later it ended in divorce. And she is alone with 2 young children, and her, Prince Charming that she had never even looked for was gone. But she said something really interesting. She said, I had to realize, even though her Prince Charming, her husband, was gone, she didn't have that relationship, that she was still a princess worthy of love, and that she still had Christ, who was the Prince of Peace, in her life. That even though there was a relationship that was broken, she could still be whole, and that her worth wasn't diminished, even though the circumstance was not what she had hoped for. And that's a really difficult situation to end up in. And I know that there are a lot of people whose hearts are broken by people who should be protecting them, caring about them, all of those things. But it really is possible to feel peace even when things around you are awry. But certainly, the treasure of a real friend that you can connect with is worth the risk of being vulnerable. It's worth the risk of not just staying in your house, but going to an activity that might make you a little uncomfortable, worth the risk of volunteering, even though it means leaving your house and talking to strangers, worth the risk of going to church or synagogue, even if you are worried that you're going to be judged. Because honestly, most of the time, everybody else there is busy enough with their own problems. They really aren't judging you. There are a few losers out there, but you know what? For the most part, people are just doing their best, I've found, in most situations. One of the things that's really important about relationships, which is why our addiction to virtual relationships is dangerous, is the lack of touch. Touch is very, very important for us. Now, I know not everybody's touchy-feely. I have some of my kids who are more like me, who like to hug and hang on you, and some who I can't even put my arm around. And that's because we're all different. But touch really matters. A couple of studies that Dr. Ornish cites, one of them was a study of HIV positive men, found that massage for 1 month caused a significant increase in both the number and cytotoxicity of natural killer cell activity. So natural killer cells, super, super important to immune function. They increased and they were more effective after regular massage. A study at the Touch Research Institute in Miami, Florida, premature babies were given 3 loving massages a day for 10 days, and they gained weight 47% faster and left the hospital 6 days sooner, which was a cost savings. This would be exponentially higher right now, but in 1997, when he wrote this, of $10,000 each, just by having that touch. If you think about what we do to newborns and preemies, there are a lot of hospitals that are getting better that just, they've got to be in the incubator. They're hooked up to everything, and they're cut off from this human connection. And thankfully, a lot more people are letting parents do the kangaroo care where they have the skin-to-skin contact. There was a really horrific experiment done in the 13th century by the German Emperor Frederick II. So he wanted to find out what language children would speak if they were raised without hearing anyone talking. He wasn't a very bright man. He took several newborns away from their parents and gave them to nurses who were forbidden to touch or talk with them. The babies never learned the language because they all died before they could talk. So they couldn't live because they weren't loved. And you need touch too. Again, getting close enough to someone to have a relationship where you're comfortable enough holding hands or putting your arm around someone, or a nice big hug. That's a degree of vulnerability, but you can get a massage. You can maybe volunteer in a way that allows you to touch and interact with people. You can't even do little things like shake people's hands. We have to have human connection. We cannot separate our body, mind, and spirit because they were made to be one united whole, and neither of them is going to function ultimately without the care and keeping of the other. You can't have great spiritual or emotional health if you don't care for your body. You can't have great physical health without nurturing your spirit, your emotions, your mind. We're all one interconnected whole. So I would encourage you, even if you've been hurt, to find ways to heal and to find ways to connect to others. Again, I think the safest way to do it is by volunteering. I really, really do, because there are so many places that so desperately need help. And if you have trouble volunteering and being around people, volunteer at an animal shelter to start with. They're always looking for people because the little puppies don't judge. But if you go, there's a website called justserve.org that has a lot of local service opportunities. You can put in where you live. But I'm sure most places, if you were to just go online and put in volunteer opportunities near me, that things would pop up, and that's going to enhance your sense of self-worth. It's going to allow you to feel God's love for you and for the person you're serving. I think it's hard to have negative feelings about people that you're helping, and that goes both ways. It's reciprocal, and it's just very, very healing, because even if you're limited and say your health isn't well enough now that you can work, if you can volunteer even a couple hours a week or a month, you are showing that there are things you can still give and that still matter. And please don't look for something to volunteer about or a place to volunteer. They're like, oh, this would be great to post online. No, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, please. If it's a great social media opportunity, it's probably not the best volunteer thing for you. And you need to find someone there's actual connection. You're feeling an actual need and you're connecting with other people. And as you do that, your healing will be hastened. So you can check out Dr. Ornish's work because he's written and presented extensively on it over the years. As I said, this was a dated book, but the principles aren't dated. We all need touch. We all need connection. And that's part of our healing journey. So remember to reach out. Don't be afraid. And remember to have hope because you are made to be whole. Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.